Your Life Unfiltered podcast with your hosts, Kitsuko Sari and Deepan Jain. In this podcast, we dig deep into the life experiences of our guests that connect the dots between their early experiences and what they're doing today. Today, we have a very special guest, Bhavik Shah. Today, we're going to experiment with the format a little bit. Before we have Bhavik introduce himself, we're going to go straight into rapid fire.
All right. Bhavik, thanks for joining us. I'll give you an easy one first, which is, tea or coffee.
I am a coffee fan.
All right. Mountains or beaches.
I prefer mountains.
All right.
But I do like beaches too, depending on the time of the year.
Okay. If there are three personalities that you would like to have dinner with, right? It could be somebody who's alive or somebody who's already passed away. Who could those three personalities be?
One person is Warren Buffett.
Okay.
I love his value investing. Mahatma Gandhi for peace.
Okay.
And then my parents. I enjoy they're alive, and having dinner with them is always great.
That's great. Okay. If what's your secret superpower?
My secret superpowers is patience, being patient and resilient, which I think it takes time to develop, and that allows you to really enjoy this journey of life, because through patience and resilience, you're able to tackle a lot of obstacles or learn a lot or go through challenging times.
Okay, great.
All right, last one in the series, because you travel a lot, right? So, East Coast or West Coast?
You're asking some tough questions, and there's some bias here. I grew up on the East Coast, but you showed me a great time on the West Coast the other month. But growing up on the East Coast, I'm a big fan of the East Coast. I was raised here, born in New Jersey, grew up in Virginia since I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
I love the East Coast, but the West Coast also has its beauty.
Okay.
I'm not going to say I don't like it, but I love the East Coast because I've been here all my life.
Okay,
we're gonna
we'll
go with
take
East Coast for that one.
We'll
take
take
East Coast
East
a lot
Coast
more
for
than
now.
West Coast.
Right.
What is your favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert? Cookies and cream ice cream.
Okay, cookies and cream. Okay. All right, now here's another one. Have you ever been on a podcast before?
No, this is my first time on a podcast.
There you go. That's what we like to hear. All right, that's what we like to hear.
You guys are taking me out of my comfort zone here. I know we've been talking about doing this for a couple of years, and I was like, all right, when I saw Deepam in California, I was like, okay, I'll do this next in the near future this year.
Alrighty. Well,
Awesome.
I think that can conclude the rapid fire round. So what we want to do now is we want to hear about you. So tell us about your early experiences, and if you can connect them to what you're doing today, that would be absolutely amazing.
Sure. So I was born and raised in New Jersey. As Githul, I grew up in the northern part of New Jersey until age 14. I was there, finished middle school there, and my family relocated to Virginia in 2004. They left corporate. My dad left corporate America to pursue the American dream and become an entrepreneur, and bought his first roadside hotel in Virginia. And that hotel was a family farm. My brother, my mom, we all worked together and learned the business bottom up, and finished high school in Virginia, went to college here at James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia by the Shenandoah Valley. I studied finance there, did my honors thesis on real estate investment trust. I knew I had a passion for real estate growing up. I just didn't know which asset class. So I was just exploring over the years. Growing up in a hospitality family, I really enjoyed hotels, but then there was other asset classes that I really liked. And by doing an honors thesis, studying finance, doing internships, I was able to explore different asset classes. And after completing my internships, I joined the family business. It was primarily hospitality assets in Virginia at that time. We were able to grow that into the retail business, bought a shopping center. We bought some triple net investments like Dairy Queen buildings or Dollar General buildings. Started diversifying into multifamily over the years, and also geographically diversifying across the country into different markets. And we continuously expanded, buying distressed assets from institutional sellers, lenders, people retiring and exiting the business, and we continued to grow, recycle assets, and continue learning different markets, meeting new people, expanding our bankers network, expanding different management company networks that we use, and we still continue to do the same thing we did a few years ago. Only started scaling it, and it's never ending. It's a passion. It's not even a business.
Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper into that, right? So I can definitely see the parallels because it looks like you grew up in New Jersey, so you had a lot of exposure to the East Coast. You moved to Virginia, where you started to learn the hospitality industry from bottoms up, and then you continued on it. So you can see the clear progression, right? But let's talk about from a personality perspective, right? Are there any like qualities that you remember or recall from when you're little that you think continued on that really drove value to what you're doing today?
I would say some of the qualitative skills or quantitative skills. Like growing up, I used to be really good at this game called Challenge 24, where they give you four numbers on a card, and you have to using all four of those numbers only once by either multiplying, dividing, subtracting. Um, you got to get to 24, and that really allowed you to think fast. And the quantitative skills were developed early on, and I was actually really good at that game, and I made it to the state level and got to first place. Or then so that was one game that really helped me in from middle school days, and then later on, Future Business Leaders of America in high school, business calculations. I made it to first place in the state, but also at the national level in the top five. So those are some of the quantitative skills, and then qualitative skills like analytical skills, which are good, but sometimes also bad because you have analysis paralysis, even in business, just like in life sometimes, and you don't want to think too hard sometimes. Sometimes you gotta use qualitative, quantitative skills, but also just take risk because without taking risk, you won't have an outsized reward. But it's always good to take calculated risks. So all those skills were very transparent to the future or to the present to allow me to make some of the decisions I make today.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
I,
very nice. And I actually want to build upon one thing you said, right? And you said about taking calculated risk. So like, can you dig a little bit deeper into the calculated risk part? Is like, is that a quality that you developed when you were much younger? That like, I obviously it may not be the exact same examples as the ones you would give today, but is there an example of like the calculated risk mindset that you remember from your childhood?
So like at that time, I wouldn't make investments when I was younger, but I guess some of the quantitative skills and then finance classes and just growing up, seeing my parents or like growing up, my brother and I had our vending machine business when we were in high school at the hotel, and that was like very calculated. You would buy 20, 25-cent cans of sodas and sell them for $1.75. So that's calculated risk, I would say, at a smaller level, and some hustle involved in that too. But other than that, like I didn't take any outsized like high level risk growing up because, of course, I didn't have the balance sheet to do it or the opportunities to take on risk like at that level. Like, oh yeah, on the
Yeah, I
business
mean, I
front.
think you're
yeah.
thinking money. Like when I'm giving that example, I'm thinking more like physical risk. So it could be like you're young, you're like, I'm gonna jump from this step to this step. I don't think I'm gonna get hurt, and then you do that, right? Because when you're young, a lot of people don't think like that. They're gonna be like, oh, I'm just gonna jump as far as I can, and all this kind of stuff, right? So when I'm thinking calculated risk when you're little, I'm talking about like minor risks you may do your day to day life that you may not have realized at the time, but you were thinking from a calculated risk perspective, saying I can do this and have fun, but I won't get injured or won't get hurt or like. Do you have any
Got it.
examples of that?
So
Yeah,
like,
tap into your Guju experiences, because
yeah,
I know some of these skills are actually runs in your blood, I guess. Not your, but like in people's in
oh yeah, I
DNA,
guess
right?
like yeah, no, okay. So now that type of risk is like when we are bike riding, what's it called? The what kind of bikes were they where you could like take them up like not bungee jump, but what are those jumps called? Mon- Goose or
Mongoose?
mongoose bikes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to have one
Oh
of
yeah.
those, and I used to do like play around with that at a little higher levels and like without my helmet on. But that's like smaller risk. I don't, I don't really outsize this. Like okay, when I was at Grand Canyon on a family trip, of course, like sometimes I was too close to the edge, and it was like just fun. But our parents would be like, "Come closer to us, like don't walk around there." But those are like smaller risks. I don't think anything was like outsized. Like today, the risk we take is at a different level, and it's so much fun. So I don't even some of that is probably risky, but like today, I don't feel like I just feel like it's very small or minute. But growing up, maybe as a child, it was like probably bigger risk.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So, tell us a little bit more about your experience growing up in the States. I know you were an immigrant kid, right? So, growing up in 90s and early 2000s in New Jersey and Virginia, how was your experience? Any interesting instances or just something that comes to mind that probably shaped you today, or it just stuck with you today? That
Sure, yeah. So growing up in Jersey in the 90s, there was a lot of Indians. We went to Pachala, so to hold our cultural values, and that's how
nice.
Ketul and I, we were friends, and then we reconnected a few years back. We used to go to Pachala every other Sunday. Would go to the temple as a child, and New Jersey was like pretty diverse,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very densely populated. So it was different when I moved to Virginia. Actually, moving to Virginia felt like a huge change when I was 14. Like in
Mm.
Jersey, I felt like I was already a part of a community. So when I moved here, it was different because it wasn't densely populated. Also, our Indian community was a lot smaller, and especially the Jain community was very very small. So it felt like a huge cultural shock for a second, even though it's only a few hours away. But then we assimilated into the culture here, and then over the years, our family, along with some other families, were able to create a Jain center here in Richmond. So that was really nice, and it's a growing population today. We were here 19 years ago. It was like a lot fewer families, and we had a
Of
small
course.
temple inside of the Hindu center, but now we have our own center, so that's really nice. And yeah, overall, I thought it was great growing up in New Jersey. I enjoyed it. Life was good. So it would be one of the states I might not mind living in a few years a month.
Oh yeah. So here's a question. It's like, as you mentioned, it was a dramatic change. So if you think back, are there any key learnings you recall from that dramatic change that has helped you elsewhere? Maybe today or in the recent past?
Like today, geographically, I could stay in pretty much. I'm open minded to staying in 50, traveling to any of the 50 states, but just being open minded and accepting and learning different geographic regions and cultures and just finding and navigating. And then people learn about you, you learn about others, and just being open minded, having a large like respecting multiple perspectives, and then you just adapt and assimilate.
Oh yeah, no, that makes total sense, right? I'm thinking more like network building, right? Because if I think about it, you moved when you were 14. That's right when you're about to enter freshman year of high school. So it's a pivotal moment in your life that you transition, right? So was there like anything you learned, like being a freshman in high school where you basically know no one, where
Yeah,
did the learnings from that experience cascade later on into your life?
so that's a great question, and you're probably getting to something because it allowed me to really build up my interpersonal skills where I don't mind going around the room and introducing myself or meeting new people, learning about them, accepting them, or them accepting me and learning more about them. So I think I was able to quickly gravitate to building a lot of friends in the community that I relocated to. And I had a lot of high school friends, and some of them went to JMU, and then some went to UVA and other schools. But that probably allowed me to develop strong interpersonal skills, and then also the other extracurricular activities along with working afterwards. Because not only did we go to school and do these extracurricular activities, but after that, we would go to our hotel and work shifts or help with marketing or whatever the family needed. So all of these skills combined probably allowed me to build interpersonal skills that I use in business today or with my friends, or like I'm not scared to reach out to someone for help or to learn about them or about their region. Um, I don't mind just randomly picking up the phone, calling them or texting them to see how they're doing and ask them questions about anything spontaneously.
That's okay. That makes a lot more sense. Okay, that's so. It sounds like the fact that you pivoted from one region to another region at such a critical age, it helped you to build that confidence in your ability to develop a network, build social connections, build interpersonal relationships, all of that. That makes perfect sense, right? To take that a step further, like, is it fair to say that once you develop that confidence, it was something you've been able to hold on to for like the next 10, 15 years that allow you to be who you are today?
I would definitely say I was definitely able to build upon it and make it a stronger and stronger foundation. And even today, like I could go to conferences, or I'm not scared to go up to CEOs of other companies or CFOs, or connect with my housekeepers at the hotels that we own and operate. It just allows me to have confidence to have conversations with anyone at any level, and it's fun, and I enjoy it a lot.
And what about the work ethic, right? Because you mentioned a very important thing. It's you used to go to school and classes and all that, and then after that you would work shifts after school, right? So the way that I envision that is what that basically means is at a relatively young age you develop that that mindset that work doesn't just end after school, like, so, and that probably carries on, right? It's like what that means is that you're willing to put in the work because you've lived through moments of your life where you worked round the clock to some degree, right? Whether it's going to school and then basically working to basically learn, and then the other piece of it is working to support the family business, right? So it sounds like you were doing a round the clock thing at a relatively young age. And is it fair to say like that probably cascaded onto your work ethic today?
Absolutely. Like very open-minded. Entrepreneurship allows you to have work flexibility in hours, but you have to put in the hard work, the hours. It's not a 9 to 5 job. Some days my days can start at 5 in the morning and then end at midnight. And some days like today, my day started a little late, 10:30, and then it'll end whenever, and then I could take breaks in between. And if it varies, sometimes there might be conferences where it might be 2 or 3 days out and just meeting people, having fun, learning about the industry or making connections in the industry. But some days it might be at the office and might come in at 8 o'clock and leave at 11 o'clock and just have a lunch break. So it varies, but I'm allowed or able to roll up my sleeves, and I don't look at the time on because it doesn't even feel like work. That's the best part. If you define your passion, and you got to figure it out. It takes time, and once you find out this is your passion and you really enjoy what you do, the time, you don't even look at the time. It just time flies by.
Okay, great.
That
Deepam,
makes
did you
sense.
have a question? I'll let you ask a question.
Yeah. So, yeah, I want to actually switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about real estate because I know you are actually that's your day job and that's your passion, as you just said, right? So, and I was just curious, given your primary focus on hotels, can you discuss just like some high level unique challenges and opportunities that come with this particular sector, especially in the light of recent economic shifts due to COVID, right? I know a bunch of all the travel was closed, business was closed, everything was closed during COVID, as well as the impact of technology that has happened in recent years on the hospitality industry.
Yeah, sure. So the hospitality industry has been very interesting from the brands with the number of franchises you have today and the options consumers have, along with Airbnb in some markets as a competitive threat, not in all markets, in some markets. And then after COVID, there was like a shutdown in many markets where you went from 100 to 0 really fast. And then some of the markets, it wasn't as bad because you had a lot of traveling nurses, or depending on the markets you were in, or people that were transporting goods. If you had economy segment hotels that needed to spend the night because they were taking, especially on Interstate 95, taking goods from Florida to Maine or to the upper Northeast, they would need a place to stay. So some hotels were not impacted as badly, but some were impacted in corporate markets or where there was no more sports and tourism, offices were closed. Those markets took a quick hit. Government markets, not as much, because if there's military bases and training still going on, they still have to house customers in hotels. So depending on your market and your demand generator, you would see impact. And then some markets came back really strong, really fast, especially the leisure markets. And Virginia has a lot of leisure, a lot of theme parks, oceans, beaches, mountains. So you got to recover really fast here. And then some markets were slower. If you look at markets in Indiana that had a lot of offices around there, it would take longer until like sports and tourism and everything came back, or they're still rebounding back slowly. Even New Jersey, it was a little longer to recover, but today it's coming back, and it's coming back stronger than 2019 levels. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, so it's been all over the place. It's been a lot of fun. COVID did allow us opportunities to actually grow our business but for some, they had to scale it down. And one of the biggest shifts in the hospitality business outside of just revenue streams is the challenges in finding good labor today and staff, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people shifted into other industries during this time as they got laid off or they saw better opportunities. So today, being in a service oriented business, for us, one of the greatest challenges, like finding not only finding staff, but finding good staff that provides great service to our guests, which is taking impact. And we're seeing in our scores, or you're not finding the passionate employees or the number of passionate employees to fulfill all the open positions everywhere.
I see. Wow. Yeah, I guess that's we are seeing it not just in hospitality but in other industries as well, with the trends of like quiet quitting and things like that. But I guess what they're predicting is that by 2026 we'll be back to normal. So it's still a couple of years out, at least, if not more, before we start to kind of get back to the pre-pandemic environment. I think they are predicting RTO will be fully uh, accomplished by 2026 as well. So we'll see if trends start to shift, but only time will tell, I guess. I was also curious about the fact that you are actually in 13 different states, right? You have real estate properties in 13 different states, and I'm sure you expanded to those states over time. I was just curious to see, like, what factors do you use when you're thinking about entering a new market, right? And then how do you evaluate whether a particular investment in that particular market is worthwhile or not? And just walk us through your thought process there.
So yeah, geographically, I'm open to doing business in any of the 50 states, depending on the opportunity presented and the net returns I could achieve, and the location of the asset within that state and that geographic market, and also to see if understanding the competitors, understanding the demand generators, and the valuation. It really gets down to, for me, multiple things like valuation, age of the asset, or if the asset is old and needs a renovation, what can I do to uplift it and take it to another level? Finding these distressed opportunities. We're a value add investor, so we're not looking for something fully stabilized or operating perfectly, because I'm looking for flaws in another asset to uplift. So geographically, I'm open to pretty much any of the 50 states. These
SF.
opportunities that we have right now, the 13 states, happened over time. We started in Virginia, made our way to North Carolina, South Carolina, slowly built went into other states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, Iowa, North Dakota, Texas, Oklahoma, Maine recently. So scattered around New Jersey. We were able to buy our first hotel in New Jersey just a couple months ago. And we're open to looking at more opportunities and growing into the other states. And I could just walk you through the last New Jersey deal, which is very special because it's right by where I grew up in East Windsor. It's in Princeton, New Jersey. And that deal, I was tracing pre-COVID since 2019. It was an amazing location at Princeton University's footsteps. Had a restaurant that was rented out next door, a separate building attached to Indian vegetarian restaurant chain A2B, Indian South Indian cuisine that came with the deal. And it was an institutional
Wow.
seller that had debt maturity. In today's economic times, with where interest rates where there are, a lot of people are going to have to pay down their loans or pay them off or get refinances, and it's going to create opportunities. And the valuations went down significantly. Location was great, the brand was great, and we saw a lot of upside potential. So population, demographics, income, and demand generators all allowed me to gravitate toward that deal.
I
Okay,
see.
I actually have a question bringing it back to your childhood, right? So you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier that one of the people you'd love to have like a meal with is Warren Buffett. So what that makes me think right away is you're a big value investor, right? And so could you like connect the dots between how that value investing mindset, how you apply it to what you do today, specifically in the real estate space?
Yeah, sure. I'm always looking for like arbitrage. I'm trying to find like things that are trading at fundamentally lower values than they should be worth on the shelf. So every day when I look at opportunities, I'm trying to see like mispriced assets and see how we could bring them back to the value that they should be technically worth according to what their peers are trading at. So he does it with stocks and companies. We do it with real estate. And primarily hospitality, but then we also look at multifamily, some retail centers, other triple net, but primarily it's hospitality assets. And
So if you don't look at value add, what thoughts go through your mind when it looks to hidden value plays? So it could be, example, an asset play where you're talking about the land. The value of the land's worth more than what the hotel is selling at, for example, right? Like, is there any like themes of areas you think about when it comes to hidden value?
yeah, sure. Like good question with the land and in the subprime crisis, or like after 2011, or subprime happened in 2008-9, but after that the mess was created and being cleaned up 2011 to 13, 14. And value add was like there was times where some of the hotels were so distressed where they just had to be exterior corridor, where you enter in from the outside, and some of those assets that the lenders had to be just torn down. But you would look at the fundamental land value, like, hey, it's a traffic light corner, X number of cars pass by this partial every day. These are the neighboring assets around there. It's this many acres, land trades at X dollars, demolition cost is Y. If there's asbestos in the building or other costs associated with demolishing it, you would value that. But then you would find fundamentally still mispriced assets because the dirt is worth so much more than just the acquisition price. So we have done that in the past where we have bought assets and are land banking them for the future outlook of the growth in the area.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for answering that. And
Well, that was
I'm
a
gonna
great
take
question
that
too.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to take it a step further. So I think in any economic environment, there is always hidden value plays, right? From your perspective, what do you think is a hidden value play today?
So today, the marketplace is changing, and it's going to continue to change with our interest rates where they are today. I think if they continue to rise or they stay at this level and debt matures, people have loans locked in for 5 or 10 years. And there's going to be a lot of debt maturing where people are going to have reset in their interest rate from 4% to 8% or 9 or 10%. And when that happens, there's going to be a huge opportunity for people that are on the sidelines waiting. And if they have cash and want to take on the risk to buy assets, I don't know if they'll be mispriced or some assets that might be irreplaceable that usually don't sell that might come up for sale, or some people might be forced out of their positions where lenders take back those assets and those assets can be bid up or purchased from the lender directly. So I think a lot of opportunities are probably in the pipeline to come, and inventory on the market is increasing today. And the other challenge today is lenders. Lenders are becoming very, very strict in their underwriting standards. So that requires borrowers or buyers of real estate or any assets that need a loan to put a higher down payment because the lenders have stringent underwriting criteria because the lenders don't want pressure from the FDIC. So I really feel in the next 12 to 24 months, if not sooner, there should be a lot of opportunities across the country.
Yeah. Do you think we're going into another mortgage crisis in the next 10 years? Like by different driver, right? I'm not talking subprime because that's bad underwriting, but do you think there's like a interest rate hike related mortgage crisis coming?
If people's margins are under pressure, which occur from like higher real estate taxes or insurance expenses because of all these catastrophes we have had on the East Coast, West Coast, in the middle of the country, tornadoes, storms that put pressure on the insurance companies that increase premiums. And if the margins are not there, it's just unfortunate. But if the net operating income of assets declines substantially, the valuation of the asset decreases. And if interest rates are staying where they are or continue to increase, it's not going to look too healthy. There might be a entire correction in valuations, or the banks are going to have to take a huge haircut, and then I don't know what's going to happen. Like banks are going to get into trouble, or borrowers are going to have to raise capital and pay down their loans. It's hard to predict. It's a speculation, but I think about it today. But the only thing that is there's one thing I know that in real estate with inflation, if you look at the graphs over the last 20, 30 years, values do over time, if you have holding power, do continue to increase. So even if there's pressure today in margins, as long as you can weather the storm, I think the values will continue to increase over time. So over a 10-year period, I think if today's asset is worth $1, I think it'll definitely be worth $2 or $3 in 10 years. But in the next 2, 3, or 4 years, with all this debt maturing and at higher rates, if the rates don't come down, I think there might, in the short term window, there might be a lot of opportunities coming.
When you're talking about your assets, as you're thinking about valuating and buying in these properties, I was just curious, in your experience, what has been your most challenging acquisition, most interesting acquisition, and most close to heart acquisition that you've had? So basically 3 examples I'm looking
deep.
for.
That's real deep.
So close to heart is very easy. I just told you guys a couple minutes ago.
Right.
The one in Princeton, New Jersey was like really nice. Like I was like, it was a great deal, but it was like close to my heart because that's where we grew up, New Jersey, and I always wanted to own assets in New Jersey.
Is that
and
a
New York
hotel
City
that
too.
you saw growing up, maybe? Like you passed it growing up by any chance?
Of course I went on Route 1 a lot, so I did pass it, but I didn't ever think like I wanted to own this particular asset. But yeah, growing up we would pass it, and around there at that time, our dreams weren't there to own a Courtyard Marriott. It was probably more like, hey, let's own like a roadside property because you got to start somewhere. So that was definitely one close to my heart. Now, the most challenging or difficult transaction, I would say, was a transaction I did where the sellers I agreed to the terms to buy the asset. The lenders were willing to take a haircut for the guys that were selling it because they were underwater, but then they actually retracted when I was ready to close. And that made it very difficult because when you have a purchase sales agreement fully executed, deposits in escrow, and all parties have signed off, you have to sell the asset. And they were retracting. So that was very difficult. And that happened to me twice in a period of 3 or 4 years, once in San Antonio and once in the Richmond market. And both times we were able to get to the finish line. And at the end of the day, it was challenging because you had to go through the whole process of like hiring local counsel, filing a litigation and a list pendants to protect your rights, and going through all the arbitration, mediation on one. And then one of them, it was quicker. The sellers realized they made a mistake, called us up, we settled it out, we closed it out, happened in 90 days. But the one in San Antonio, it took 2-3 years, but we did get it closed, and it was a grand slam dunk. It worked out, but those 2 transactions were both on one of the most challenging transactions we worked on because it really exercised more energy than we needed to. And then there's one more question you asked. Most challenging, most close to heart. Most interesting one. Okay. And a hospitality or?
It could be anyone.
Sure. I guess the most interesting transaction was one that allowed us to pivot from doing hospitality into multifamily. And that happened during the early parts of COVID in Memphis, Tennessee. It was a Homewood Suites hotel that we actually lost that transaction prior to COVID, and it was awarded to another group that didn't transact. And then the sellers came back to us in COVID and said they want to sell it to us. And it was an extended stay hotel in a nice part of Memphis that we were able to rezone and convert to multifamily. And we're going through the full renovation right now. And I'm fortunate to work with my brother on our entire portfolio now. He joined our family business in 2019, and he helps with all of the rezoning and entitling of a lot of these conversions we do from hotel to multifamily. And going through that whole process was time consuming, from getting zoning to getting all the plans finally approved to get permits. And now execution of that plan is occurring where we're completely renovating and gutting that structure and getting it ready to the conversion use of multifamily, which will fully be done in the first quarter of next year, and then we'll start renting it out. But it was one of the most interesting transactions. We changed the use of a hotel to multifamily, and there's a huge shortage of housing across the country. And now we have 5 projects on our books across the country where we're converting hotels to multifamily within our own portfolio.
Yeah, that's amazing, because essentially what that means is after you've done it through it once, you have the roadmap now on if you wanted to do again, how to do it.
Exactly. And then once you learn it, then you go do the same thing. And then we did that to one of the first hotels I actually bought in Williamsburg, Virginia, where we got it fully rezoned now. Now we're going through the whole architectural engineering, drawing boards, and everything is zoned now, and we're going to take it to the permit level and then start work on that and just repeat into other markets.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, the playbook will definitely help you make it more efficient in the future as well. So challenging uh, transaction that you talked about, uh, what learnings did you have that that stayed with you, or that probably that you thought about, that this is something I can learn from this particular instance, and then hopefully do better in the next one?
So on one of them, it was very interesting because it was a Canadian seller selling his hotel, his only hotel in the U.S. in San Antonio, and he had a change of heart from the time I signed up to do the deal to the time I went to closing, and all the terms were agreed upon in the contract. So I kind of learned that once you put something under contract, or start doing your due diligence even before you put it under contract, and try to have swift execution and don't be slow at all, because you don't want people changing their mind. And I learned that time can kill deals. So if you're into it, yes, you want to do your due diligence, but be very cognizant of time so people don't have that change of heart. And just make sure a contract is always fully executed and the deposit is in. Because if you don't have your deposit in, even if you have a fully executed contract, it might not be worth anything. So I did learn that.
It's not binding. It's not binding. Exchange of money. Yeah.
Exactly, because you always have to exchange your deposit into the escrow of the title company. So that was a good learning curve on that deal. And the other part that was very interesting on that deal was I hadn't done any CMBS loans, which are very complicated, like bond-based loans. And that loan was a CMBS loan that the guy had to defease. And it was an expensive time to do that because there's a correlation when interest rates drop, and if his rates are higher, there's a huge fee for him to defease that loan. So that was the reason why he was changing. It wasn't he wanted more money from me, but he had to pay a huge penalty to Wall Street, to whatever bank he borrowed his money from. So him dragging out the process allowed the fees to get lower. And that was a point where we were able to strike the deal. And then instead of going through the whole litigation and him losing the case and paying all of my legal fees, he just settled it out. But he was able to lower his fees, and then he also got to the point where he knew that through arbitration, everything, he realized that he did make a mistake, that he shouldn't have signed up to do that. But those were a few things I learned, that definitely you want to have a binding contract, and you want to make sure your deposit is in with the title company, not with the seller, because then it's a problem. But title companies where you want to warehouse your deposits.
Right. Makes sense.
Let's talk, interests outside of real estate. So let's get to know a little bit more about you. So what's something that really brings a smile to your face that you'd like to talk about?
Sure. I love traveling, trying out new restaurants, vegetarian, vegan cuisine. When I'm traveling, I love supporting them. I find them to be like, especially after COVID or during COVID, I knew they went through a lot of struggles. So like trying out different cuisine, spending time with family, and especially my baby niece. She'll be turning 2 years old and we share a birthday. I really enjoy that. Hanging out with my friends around the country, which I'm kind of fortunate. Like I could reconnect, like how I've been able to meet you, Deepam, in the Bay Area. Ketu, I was able to connect with a few times when I went to New Jersey, and then a lot of other friends around the country. It really helps to staying in touch when you travel, and I enjoy that. And I always like learning about my friends' success or what they're going through. Also mentorship. I have some mentees, and also I am a mentee to some people, so I love paying it forward. And I really enjoy that because in this relationship of mentorship, mentor-mentee, you learn on both sides, and it's a lot of fun.
Right. What are some myths about real estate that you like to bust?
That it's not like simple and easy. Like you want to do your due diligence. It's not always like, oh, it's a hedge against inflation. It's always going to go up. There's times when real estate does bust, and it's cyclical. So don't think that you make an investment and you're only going to make money. And yeah, if you buy it in cash and don't have debt, chances are good. And if you bought it right, you're good. But if you have debt and if you don't do your due diligence, you can get into trouble. So don't think like it's simple. And real estate on a piece of paper oftentimes looks sexier when you're driving by. You're like, wow, this is a beautiful full service Marriott. But let me be honest, full service hotels, I love staying at them. I don't want to own them. It's a lot of operations and operationally intense. So real estate has its pros and cons, and it's like any business or any job. It's you have to do your evaluation and make sure you make the right decision by going through the underwriting process.
You
What
mentioned
about
about traveling, so I know we talked about this a little bit. I was really surprised by your answer, but could you tell us how many nights last year were you at home versus at the hotels?
Okay, yeah, I'll tell you right now, okay? I'll just be
Because you travel a lot.
I
I
traveled a
know, I
lot
know.
this year with for personal, friends' weddings, birthday parties to business, a mix of everything. Um, but I'll give you guys a precise answer in 1 minute.
I actually know the answer to it. I just wanna just ask this question again because I was so shocked when I heard that.
and it's
I
probably
was like,
increased
are you
since you
serious?
last talked to him.
Yeah, so
Oh,
I would
100%.
say in calendar year 2023, I have traveled 187 nights.
Oh
Wow,
my
that is like
God.
3/4 of the entire year so far.
Yeah, so and we have had I would say
Six
about
out of 10
300
months.
nights. Yeah, 6, 10 months. So yeah, it was a decent amount of travel for conferences, personal property tours, for business. Some of it was family trips, some of it was leisure. But it's been good. I love it, and I get to experience hospitality at some of my own hotels or other people's hotels, and meet a lot of people. And it was a great time. And also, we were also recycling through some of our assets and selling some assets, and also recycling and redeploying capital. So I was touring a lot of hotels in this time too.
So, of all the travel you've done in the last couple of years, or even beyond that, right? What has been your favorite, like either state or place to visit domestically?
Domestically, my favorite place to visit um, in the last few years. I really like the city of San Antonio in Texas.
Mhm.
From business, from the architect, history, the Riverwalk. I like it's a small city that's underrated. It's close to Austin. I haven't spent too much time in Austin. I'm sure I'll like that too, but it's like less traffic. It has a lot to offer. So that's one of my favorite cities that's underrated. And other than that, I like California, New York City to travel and visit. Not to I don't think I could live there. I'm not used to like all the traffic and really fast paced environment because I like peaceful life. Maybe the outskirts of it. But yeah, I think I would say the number one spot out of all the domestic travel I had in the last few years and where I conducted business is San Antonio.
All right, I got one more for you. What's the most overrated spot?
I would say the most overrated spot is LA.
Okay,
Okay.
curious. What makes you say that?
Just because like when I spent time there last year in the fall, like I would say LA downtown is probably the reason I would say it's too overrated, but there's probably other parts of the suburbs of LA that I need to experience more. Like I have traveled through some of it when I was younger, but LA downtown did not impress me. I have been there, or I go there every year for conferences or to spend time, and the downtown area takes away from the whole experience. And I guess there's a lot they need to do there to improve that entire city still of LA.
Yeah,
I'm
don't
sure
show
the
this to
suburbs are
Nikita.
different.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of history in LA, which I think will shock you. So, believe it or not, you look back 80 years ago, LA was an oil drilling operation. I don't know
Wow.
if you knew that. To this day, there's a lot of fake buildings across LA where the whole idea is so that there's not you know, it's not an eyesore basically. So the whole idea is they put a lot of fake buildings up just to mask where the oil operations are. And even to this day, there are some oil drilling operations that happen, but it's a small fraction of what it used to be.
Oh wow. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to get a new tour of it um, this upcoming winter. And I guess a little bit was weather because I did multiple trips there this year, and the weather was not in most favorable. It was like actually pretty cold. I was expecting my expectations were so much like going in, like I was expecting better climate and a better experience, and then I guess there's a lot of poverty in the streets of LA. So I
Yeah,
felt like
it's California, like the main cities in
California.
California in general for you.
Yeah,
But
but
Deepam, I think you're gonna really like this next one. So believe it or not, you look back 300 or 400 years, Did you know there is the largest lake in the entire United States wasn't by the Great Lakes. It was in California.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I believe if I remember correctly, I think it was Lake Chad. I think that's what it was called. But basically, for like hundreds of years, it was the largest lake. It was basically like half of California was a lake, by the way.
Oh,
But
wow.
then, if you look back, probably about 200 years ago, what ended up happening is, as you guys are well aware, California has not the most reliable rainfall, and so there was a lot of drought situations. So what back when California was still a very rural and agricultural state, what used to happen is they saw this source of fresh water in the form of this massive lake. What they started to do is they started to like create irrigation channels using the water from the lake and diverting it to basically water the crops. And as a result of like probably 150 years of that, Lake Chad continually became smaller and smaller. And so now, like Lake Chad today, and I'm just gonna Google in a second because I'm pretty sure it's Lake Chad, but it's something like that. But now, like the entire Lake Chad, it's like 5% of what it used to be.
Wow.
Wow.
Interesting.
Also, I think the population expanded, like it exploded here as well, right? Over the last 100 years or so, both in SF, Bay Area, as well as in down LA because of Hollywood there. I guess that also contributed to the consumption of so much water from this particular lake.
Tulare Lake. I got confused. I don't know why I'm thinking Lake Chad.
I see.
So it was
Wow.
Lake Tulare. Tulare Lake was one of the biggest lakes in the entire country. It took up maybe not 50%, but a huge chunk of California.
What was it called?
That's huge.
Tulare Lake.
Tulare Lake. Nice.
Bhavik, I have
Let's
an
see.
interesting question for you. Since you're a hotelier, right? It's natural for me to ask some secrets about the behind the scenes of the hotel life, right? So any secrets you want to share with us that people don't really know about? This is more from a consumer perspective.
From a consumer perspective, okay. Extended stay durations or short, like quick trips, or what
Whatever,
kind of?
anything, any interesting tidbits you can share that people don't really know too much about the hotel industry.
I guess the pricing fluctuates. Revenue management is consistently changing prices. So sometimes you could also make your reservations in advance directly with. One thing I want to share is like, don't go on Expedia, Hotels.com, or Booking.com to make your reservations. If you're staying at a Marriott, Hilton, Choice Hotel, Wyndham, whichever franchise you're staying with, try to make it directly on their website because their cancellation policies are less stringent that way, and
I see.
there's no intermediary helping you facilitate that booking. And then also rates do fluctuate. So sometimes if you make a reservation in advance, check as it gets closer to, because if the demand hasn't picked up, the rates will drop. So if you're trying to find a good deal, you can play around with pricing that way. Points clubs and all of that. It's like if you're loyal, if you travel a lot, you can be loyal to one brand, and then if you build up certain status, you'll get a lot of points or free nights and better upgrades and better treatment at some of the hotels. And other than that, I don't know if there's too many other secrets to share.
No, that's
Hospitality is pretty simple business. Like you go in, find out like what do you prefer. Like, do you want a hotel with a kitchen, or do you want a hotel right off the interstates? Like it's a lot about preference, and there's a lot of options. I can definitely assure you that in most markets you have a lot of options of different places to stay at. There's a lot of competition.
100%.
Deepam, I think you're gonna like this. We're gonna go multi-format for the first time. I'm gonna share my screen, and so people that are listening into this podcast on the video format are gonna be able to see this and learn a little bit about history.
All right, let's
Can
do
you guys
it.
see the screen?
Yep.
Yeah. So believe it or not, as you can see here, California used to be flush with water. This is the entire state of California. You can see there was the Tulare Basin or Lake Tulare. There was also a channel of rivers, the San Joaquin River, and then there was a Sacramento River. So you can see that this was a massive body of water that used to be in California, and it was flush with a lot of rivers. Over the years with the agricultural boom and people diverting water away from these rivers and the Tulare Basin, the Lake Tulare became a fraction of what it once was. And then at the same time, most of the water pockets in California dried up. But you can see at one point it was flush with water.
Oh wow. So hard to believe, because these days it's such a, there's hardly any rainfall here, and there's always drought situation, at least for the last 10-15 years has always been, droughts every single year or probably every other year. So it's really surprising that there was so much water here once. Now, not anymore.
Yeah, and
Thanks for
what that
sharing that,
tells you
Ketul. I didn't
is,
know.
That was great, Ketul.
yeah, what that basically tells you is, and I always think there's so much to learn from history, right? What that basically tells you is that if enough generations pass where people don't know about this or forget about this, we're probably doomed to repeat it again. So, I mean, today we have the Great Lakes, over in, I guess the northern half of the United States. But if we start drawing upon that water and redirecting it to serve our purposes, some of those lakes could dry up over time as well. So it's really a lesson. So I'm definitely a big believer in understanding and learning about history for that reason.
100%.
And I'm actually sure, Bhavik, you probably do the same when it comes to real estate. Like, have you read into the history of real estate, asset classes of the past, why they failed, learnings from them and applying it to a more modern day setting?
In terms of, I'd like to learn from experience of people. So I have studied different asset classes in terms of like when I was doing my honors thesis, in terms of returns or like the retail space or like understanding different retail spaces and seeing history with that. And I guess I'll share a cool fact from my findings from my honors thesis. One of them was like neighborhood grocery anchored shopping centers, and especially if they have pharmacies or just like grocery anchored, some of the dollar businesses that wouldn't go away. Those centers at that time, back in 2011, 2012, I felt provided extra value to investors or more security because retail space has been shifting. So trends probably have changed, but at that time, it was from historical returns and experience on the retail side. I was able to dig into historical trends from that perspective, but I haven't really like read like history of each particular asset class, and it's always constantly changing. But now that you mentioned it, I might want to study a few different ones.
I would look at all the bankers of the past, like the Morgans. You look at basically all the tycoons of the past. There's so much to learn from what they did, and I'll give you a specific example in real world context today, right? So how are when it comes to certain neighborhoods and communities, right? How do they grow in popularity so quickly in a matter of 20 years? And a good example, a more recent example, could be Austin, right? Austin, I mean, it still existed as a city in the past, but like it's really become a booming city today, right? So if you really think about it, it was strategic investments made by a bunch of people in an area that caused that area to boom. And so if you think of it in a real estate context, you can probably replicate that if you understand the trends and you're able to get enough people together to go onto the same area, right? So even San Francisco, right? San Francisco was not always a tech hub. So what changed from the 1980s to the this decade now that caused for a region that was basically not as economically viable as it is today to become the booming center of technology today? So in general, I think if you understand the patterns of history on why major cities became major cities, you can learn a lot from that. Even New York City, right? New York City has been big for a while, but at some point it was nothing, right? You look back 300 years, probably it was nowhere near what it is today. So what caused it to become a major city in metropolitan?
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense, Ketul. Bhavik, before we close, do you have any recommendations for our listeners? And a recommendation could be a piece of media, like a movie, book, any podcast, or could be general advice as well.
One of the recommendations I had was I read this ethnographic study growing up, Nickel and Dime by Barbara Ehrenreich, and I was really able to see the other perspective in life because a lot of us are like fortunate or blessed, grateful to have great friends, family, have a good path, but sometimes to respect others' perspectives, that book allowed me to see behind the scenes on a life that we all were able to skip, even though we came from immigrant families or didn't have to go through the struggle. And that allowed me to make it easier to connect with people at all levels and appreciate and be grateful for other people that work for our families or that you connect with or that provide you hospitality. And that was one of my favorite ethnographic studies that I read. And I always recommend that. And then the other part is don't be scared to ask questions. Reach out to people. There's no dumb questions. and be a sponge. And intellectual curiosities, I find it amazing, and I love when people ask questions, and I also love asking questions too. And don't be scared to reach out to someone for help, or if you need a mentor or any assistance you need. It's always feel free to reach out. Even if you want to reach out to me, feel free. Ketu or Lipa would be happy to share my information to anyone here.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, Bhavik, thank you so much for joining and sharing a little bit about yourself. We hope you enjoyed your first podcast ever. So that's an accomplishment right there. Check it off your bucket list.
Thank you. I guess this is great experience. First time, and I enjoyed it. And you guys did a great job hosting and asking questions and creating a cool environment. And we all learned a little, and it was fun. The hour flew by.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. Again, thank you to all the listeners for tuning in. We look forward to hearing your feedback on the next episode. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Have a great night, everyone.